Now let's get to culture. Culture is wrong all the time because why? What's it based on? It's based on faulty messaging from culture. Because what have we said about emotions all of our lives? Since the existence of humanity, emotions are bad. That, what do we say? Oh, you need to be rational. Yeah, don't let your emotions get in the way. We've sent this message that our emotions are bad. Well, we now know that we feel before we ever have a thought. Emotions are the single greatest gift, the single most important thing we need. And our whole existence, for billions of years, we've said emotions are terrible. And so we are all vastly undereducated and unaware of how our emotions drive everything. Our culture has damaged us severely. Now, I know when I talk about this stuff, it feels like I'm assaulting you, and that's an emotional experience. And think of why that is. Culture and childhood said, if I don't have the right answer, I get in trouble with mom and dad. And we created a definition that means I'm a bad person. And so when you hear some of the stuff I talk about and the words I choose, you are reaching back from your childhood, putting your parents' face and the culture's face on top of me and saying, wow, Kenny sure talks down to me. I'm not. That's the emotion you're constructing and the definition you're placing on it based on your life experiences. That's what the worst day cycle shows us. We're just pulling all of our pain from the past and reliving it. And in that moment, you're reliving it against yourself and pointing the finger at me. It's what we all do. That's why we're not responsible for other people's emotions, because we're stealing from the past and blaming you in the present. That's how it works. So, simple things about the culture. Did you know that as recent as the late 1960s, that our culture said it was bad to run? That the marathon, they wouldn't let women run the marathon. It was outlawed from the Olympics, and there was a huge brouhaha about running in a marathon, that it would, hurt women, they would die, they're too weak. Think of that, just like 50 years ago. Our culture believed that women were too weak to run in a marathon. Isn't that fascinating? Another thing, as I said, what have we said about emotions? That they're bad. What do we think about emotions? That we think before we feel. It's not true. Now I'm going to read you something else. Another, massively, I've been saying this for a long time and people really want to argue with me. Women are not romantic. Never have been, never will be. Women talk about romance. Men are incredibly romantic because men do romance. You watch all of these reality shows and you watch how all the men do all these romantic things. Do you ever see the women do it? 1 out of 100. Women don't know how to be romantic. They talk about it, they demand it, they want it. But women are not as emotionally deep as we have said. There's no truth to that. It's been a false premise that the culture has passed on. And she talks about that. I want to read to that. She talks about experimenting with this and doing research on it. When the same people record their emotional experiences as they occur in everyday life, she's talking about men and women, there are no sex differences. Some men and some women are very emotional, and some are not. Likewise, the female brain is not hardwired for emotion or empathy. See, we've been sold this message by the culture that women are more. It's not true. And the male brain is hardwired for stoicism or rationality. This whole false, macho, gotta be the man, it's all baloney. It's just culture. Where do these gender stereotypes come from? In the United States, at least, women routinely express more emotion when compared to men. For example, women move their facial muscles more when watching films than men do. But women don't report more intense experiences of emotion while watching a film. This finding, if nothing else, explains why the stereotypes of the stoic man and the emotional woman leak into everyday experience. We have all of these cultural definitions that are wrong, but we believe them. and they become how we construct an emotion that we then use as a victim position or a power position, whatever. All right? There isn't a more emotional side than the other. It depends on the way you were raised by your parents and the cultural messaging you received. Okay? So, how do we completely stop being controlled? Now I'm going to give you resources, because what do we need to do? We need new knowledge, skills, and tools, because we have to change the culture and society, and we have to change us, the parenting we received and the parenting we now give. That's how we're going to change this and develop emotional mastery, and so all of us can be free of the guilt and the burden of people trying to blame us for their emotions, and also people trying to control our emotions. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to give you a simple little tip for physiology, because remember, that's the other piece of the physiology, childhood, and culture. Physiology, HALT. I want you to think HALT. Don't allow yourself to get hungry, angry, lonely, tired. As she points out in her book, they've done experiments where judges, if they see people come up for parole hearings right before lunch, there's a disproportionate that most judges will not grant parole. But after lunch, they go right back to their normal way of dishing out, parole or no parole. But just before lunch, they rarely give out parole. Why? Because they're confusing their gut feeling. They're hungry. They confuse that physiology with an emotion of, ooh, this guy, no, I have this bad feeling about this guy. Well, the bad feeling is he's hungry. He doesn't have emotional mastery, so he's misreading. And so we want to regulate our physiology and do that through HALT. Don't allow yourself to get hungry, angry, lonely, tired. That will help you with your emotions. All right? Number 2, we need to heal our life experiences and change the culture. To do that, we need to learn really emotional mastery. And I've developed my own emotional mastery method. So I encourage you, sign up for my free class, Your Journey to Emotional Mastery. You can go to my website, www.thegreatnessu, that's the letter U.com. And you can sign up for that free class, Your Journey to Emotional Mastery. Number 2, we need to conquer the worst day cycle. I'm going to give you 2 options for that. The first one is go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. And then go to my Worst Day Cycle playlist. In there, I have a 5-part series that gives you the outline of how society, culture, and parenting create the worst day cycle, which has shaped and created our emotions that we're then working against ourselves and destroying our lives with. Okay, because we don't have this education on how all of this works. Well, I give you that. That 5-part series is called Reclaim Your Authentic Self by Becoming Trauma Informed. And finally, if you really want the full process to learn the emotional mastery method, well, not all of the emotional mastery method, but the beginnings of the emotional mastery method, to fully understand the worst day cycle, which is critical if you want to free yourself of the burden of other people's emotions and being controlled emotionally, you must understand and conquer the worst day cycle in yourself that both your parents and culture and society have placed in you, and they're robbing you of your full potential. To do that, pick up my book, Your Journey to Success. So there you go. Now you can see you have the resources to start developing the ability to drop the guilt and be free emotionally. All it requires is doing some work. That's it. And you can completely turn your life around. If you think this will help somebody, please share it. Leave me your comments. And as always, enjoy the journey.